The lights flickered in the lower decks of Chrono Station, casting long shadows across rusted metal walls that had seen better days. Down here, in the forgotten bowels of the massive trading hub, something stirred in the darkness. The air was thick and stale, carrying the smell of old machinery and neglect. Water dripped somewhere in the distance, echoing through empty corridors that nobody visited anymore. This was where they kept the things the galaxy wanted to forget. The other species whispered about it in hushed tones whenever they passed by the restricted section. The beast. The Vriken. The monster that even the warrior races feared to approach. Parents told their children scary stories about what lived down there in the dark. Traders hurried past the lower deck access points, avoiding eye contact with the security drones that patrolled the area day and night. Her name was Kethra, though few bothered to remember it anymore. To the thousands of beings living and working on Chrono Station, she was simply a threat to be contained. Something dangerous. Something less than a person. She stood 7 feet tall when she rose to her full height, all corded muscle and power. Her midnight black fur absorbed what little light reached her cell, making her almost invisible in the shadows. Only her amber eyes gave her away, glowing softly in the dim light like twin stars in the darkness. Her claws were long and curved, strong enough to shred steel plating if she wanted to. Her fangs could crush bone without effort. The Galactic Council had declared her kind too dangerous for civilized space 3 years ago. Too aggressive, they said. Too unpredictable. Too violent. One by one, the Vrykens had been rounded up and exiled to forgotten corners of the galaxy, locked away where they could not threaten the peaceful species who made up the council. Kethra had been one of the last, brought to Chrono Station and locked in a reinforced cell that could withstand just about anything. She sat alone now on the cold metal floor, her back against the wall, listening to the sounds of the station above her head. Life went on up there in the bright, clean levels where normal people lived. She could hear the chittering of the insectoid clicking as they traded goods in the marketplace, their voices like wind through dry leaves. She could hear the melodic singing voices of the elegant Seraphians conducting their business deals, all grace and beauty. She could hear the guttural laughter of Kron warriors sharing drinks in the station bars, telling stories of battles and glory. All of them were free. All of them were safe from her. All of them went about their days without a second thought for the creature locked away in the darkness below. None of them knew the truth. None of them cared to know. It was easier to believe the story they had been told. Easier to accept that she was a monster than to question why she was really here. Kethra closed her eyes and tried not to think about home. Tried not to remember the forests of Vero X Prime, the feel of wind in her fur, the taste of freedom. That life was gone now. The cell was her world. These sounds from above were her only connection to the living galaxy. And every day felt longer than the last. Far above, in the brightly lit docking bay where ships came and went every hour, a human colony ship had just arrived for refueling and resupply. The bay was enormous, big enough to hold 50 vessels at once, with high ceilings and gleaming floors that reflected the lights like mirrors. Hundreds of different species moved through the space, going about their business, barely noticing one more ship among so many. But for 8-year-old Emily Parker, everything was new and amazing. She pressed her small face against the viewing window of the arrival gate, her breath fogging the glass as she stared with huge eyes at the alien station beyond. She had never seen so many different kinds of beings in one place before. There were tall ones and short ones, ones with scales and ones with fur, ones that floated and ones that crawled. It was like every storybook she had ever read had come to life right in front of her. Her father, Robert Parker, stood beside her with his hand resting gently on her shoulder. He was a xenobiologist, someone who studied alien life forms, and he had been excited about this stop for weeks. But right now, watching his daughter's face light up with wonder, he was even more excited to see her so happy. She had been through so much in the past year since her mother passed away. Seeing her smile like this made everything worth it. "Stay close, sweetheart," Robert said softly, ruffling her blonde hair the way he always did. "This place is bigger than anything we have back on Earth. I don't want you getting lost in the crowd." Emily nodded but did not take her eyes off the window. "Dad, look at that one. It has 6 arms. And that one looks like it is made of crystal." Robert smiled. His daughter had inherited his curiosity about the universe, and he loved that about her. But he also knew that curiosity could sometimes lead to trouble, especially in a place as big and complicated as Chrono Station. A figure approached them through the crowd, moving with smooth, gliding steps. It was a Seraphian, one of the elegant crystalline beings that seemed to shimmer under the station lights. His name was Veldaz, and he wore the badge of a station administrator on his chest. His features were hard and angular, like someone had carved a face from colored glass. When he spoke, his voice had a musical quality that somehow managed to sound cold at the same time. "Welcome to Chrono Station, humans," Velda said, though his tone made it clear this was duty, not genuine warmth. "I trust your journey was acceptable. A word of warning before you proceed into the station proper. The lower decks are restricted to all visitors and most residents. We have a dangerous creature contained there. For your safety and the safety of others, you must stay in the upper levels at all times. This is not a suggestion. It is station law." Emily looked up at the tall alien, then at her father, then back at Veldas. Her green eyes were full of innocent curiosity. What kind of creature? Veldas's expression hardened, his crystalline features seeming to frost over. He looked down at the small human child with something like contempt. "A beast that deserves no sympathy, little one. That is all you need to know. That is all anyone needs to know. Now, please proceed to processing. Your ship will be refueled within 6 hours." He turned and glided away before either of them could ask anything else, leaving Robert and Emily standing there in the busy docking bay. Robert frowned, something about the administrator's words bothering him. He had studied hundreds of species during his career, and he knew that words like beast and monster were often used to justify terrible things. But Emily was tugging on his hand, eager to explore the station, and he pushed the thought aside. They had 6 hours. What harm could come from a little looking around? If he had known what was coming, he might have taken his daughter straight back to the ship and never looked back. 3 days had passed since the Parkers arrived at Chrono Station, and Emily had spent every moment exploring. Her father had warned her to stay close, but the station was just too interesting. There were so many corridors to discover, so many strange machines humming and buzzing with alien technology. She had promised to be careful, and she meant it. She just wanted to see how everything worked. That morning, Emily had wandered near the engineering section on level 3. The doors had been open, and she could see technicians working on glowing panels that looked like nothing she had ever seen on Earth. Colors swirled inside transparent tubes. Energy crackled between silver conductors. It was beautiful, like watching lightning dance in bottles. She had only stepped inside for a moment just to get a closer look. She had not touched anything. She had been careful. But then the lights went out. Alarms started blaring throughout the station, loud and piercing. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. People started running and shouting in dozens of different languages. Emily had panicked and run back to find her father, her heart pounding in her small chest. She did not understand what was happening. All she knew was that something had gone terribly wrong. The main power core had suffered a catastrophic malfunction. Critical systems were failing across multiple levels. Life support was running on backup generators that would not last more than a day. The station was home to over 10,000 beings, and without power they would all be in danger. The engineering crews scrambled to assess the damage, but the news was bad. Really bad. The problem was deep inside the maintenance conduits in the lower levels. The passages were narrow, barely 2 feet wide in some places, designed for maintenance robots that had broken down years ago and never been replaced. No adult from any species on the station could fit through those tight spaces. They needed someone small. Someone child-sized. And that was when Veldas made his move. The Seraphian administrator called for an emergency gathering in the station's main plaza, a huge open area where hundreds of beings could assemble. The crowd was nervous, frightened, talking amongst themselves about the power failure. Veldas stood on a raised platform, his crystalline body reflecting the emergency lights like a blood-red diamond. He raised his hands for silence, and slowly the crowd quieted down. "Citizens of Chrono Station," Veldas began, his voice carrying across the plaza. "We face a crisis, but I have discovered the source of our troubles." The human child was seen in the engineering section moments before the power failure. She was tampering with station systems. Emily felt her stomach drop. She had been near engineering, yes, but she had not touched anything. She looked up at her father, who had gone pale. "Under galactic law," Veldas continued, "those who cause damage must make restitution. The child will repair what she has broken." Robert Parker pushed through the crowd, his face desperate. "She's 8 years old. She didn't sabotage anything. She's just a kid who was curious." "Then she will prove her innocence by repairing the damage," Veldas replied, his voice cold as ice. "The conduits can only be accessed through the lower levels. She is small enough to fit. She will go down and make the repairs." A wave of shocked gasps rippled through the crowd. Everyone on the station knew what the lower levels meant. Everyone knew what was kept down there in the darkness. "You're sending her to die," Robert shouted, his voice breaking. He tried to run toward his daughter, but security drones flew down from their positions on the walls. Their mechanical arms grabbed him, holding him back. He struggled against them, reaching for Emily. Please? She's all I have left. Don't do this. The crowd watched in uncomfortable silence. The insectoid clicking shuffled their feet and looked away, their compound eyes reflecting shame they did not want to acknowledge. The Seraphians whispered to each other behind their hands but made no move to intervene. Even the Kron warriors, those proud beings who claimed to value honor above all things, stood frozen. They were big and strong and could have stopped this with a word, but they remained silent. The truth was simple and ugly. Humans were new to the Galactic Council. They had only joined a few months ago. They were unproven, expendable, and nobody wanted to challenge Vel'Thuz. He had power and connections, and crossing him meant trouble. It was easier to look away. Easier to let this happen to someone else's child. Security drones surrounded Emily. One of them handed her a repair kit that was almost as big as she was. The tools inside rattled and clanked. She could barely hold it with both hands. Tears streamed down her face as she looked back at her father. "Dad?" she cried out. "Emily, I'll find another way. I'll get you out. I promise." Robert was still fighting against the drones, his voice hoarse from shouting. But it was no use. The drones pushed Emily toward the lower deck access elevator. The crowd parted to let them through, everyone avoiding eye contact. Nobody wanted to see the terror in that little girl's eyes. Nobody wanted to acknowledge what they were allowing to happen. The elevator doors opened with a hiss. It was dark inside, lit only by a single failing light that flickered and buzzed. Emily was pushed inside. She turned around, clutching the heavy repair kit, and saw her father one last time. He was being held back by 4 drones now, his face twisted in anguish. Their eyes met across the plaza. "I love you, sweetheart," Robert screamed. "Be brave. Just be brave." Then the doors sealed shut with a heavy metallic clang that sounded like a tomb closing. Emily was alone in the elevator as it began to descend. Down, down, down into the lower levels where nobody went. Where the beast lived. She tried to be brave like her father said. She tried to remember what he taught her about staying calm in scary situations. Take deep breaths. Think clearly. Don't panic. But she was 8 years old, and she was more terrified than she had ever been in her entire life. The elevator creaked and groaned as it descended. The temperature dropped. The air got thicker, harder to breathe. The single light flickered faster, casting crazy shadows on the walls. Emily counted the levels in her head. 5, 6, 7. How far down did this thing go? Finally, the elevator shuddered to a stop. The doors did not open right away. For a moment, Emily had hoped that maybe it was broken, maybe she would not have to go out there. But then, slowly, the doors slid open with a sound like grinding metal. Cold air rushed into the elevator, carrying smells of rust and decay. The corridor beyond was dark, lit only by occasional emergency lights that were spaced too far apart. The walls were covered in grime and corrosion. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, each drop echoing like a countdown. Emily stepped out into the flickering darkness, her legs shaking so badly she could barely walk. The elevator doors closed behind her immediately, and she heard the mechanism engaging as it went back up. She was trapped down here now. There was no way back up until someone sent the elevator down again. Emily froze as the massive form emerged from the shadows, and for a moment time seemed to stop. Kethra was even larger than the story suggested. She had to be at least 7 feet tall, maybe more. Her black fur rippled over powerful muscles as she moved, catching what little light existed in the dark corridor. Each step made a sound as her claws scraped against the metal floor, sending shivers down Emily's spine. The Vriken moved slowly, deliberately, her head lowered as she studied the tiny human who had been thrown into her domain. Every instinct in Emily's body screamed at her to run. Her legs wanted to carry her away as fast as possible. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard it hurt. But there was nowhere to go. The elevator doors had sealed behind her. The corridor stretched in only 2 directions, both leading deeper into the restricted zone. Running would be pointless. The creature was faster, stronger, and knew these passages better than anyone. So instead, Emily did something that surprised even herself. She spoke. I'm Emily," she said, her voice trembling so much she barely recognized it as her own. She had to force the words out past the lump of fear in her throat. "They said I have to fix the power conduit. They said people will die if I don't fix it." Kethra stopped moving. Her pointed ears twitched forward, swiveling toward the sound of the child's voice. The girl was not screaming. She was not throwing things or trying to hurt her. She was not treating Kethra like a mindless monster that only understood violence. The Vrikan tilted her massive head to one side, her amber eyes narrowing with something that might have been curiosity. Or maybe confusion. Nobody had spoken to her like this in 3 years. Nobody had spoken to her at all. Emily's hands were shaking as she bent down and picked up the repair kit she had dropped. She set it down more carefully this time and pulled out a small datapad that showed the station schematic. The screen glowed blue in the darkness, illuminating her frightened face. She studied the map, trying to make sense of the alien symbols and diagrams. Her father had taught her some basics about reading technical layouts, but this was more complicated than anything she had seen before. "It's up there," Emily said, pointing with one small finger at a panel high on the wall. It was at least 15 feet above the floor, maybe more. Emergency lights flickered around it, showing burn marks and damage. I can't reach it. I'm not tall enough." For a long moment nothing happened. Emily held her breath, wondering if the beast understood her at all. Maybe Vrykans did not speak the common galactic language. Maybe this was all pointless and she was going to die down here in the dark. But then Kethra moved. She approached slowly, each footstep careful and measured. Emily flinched, her whole body going rigid with fear, but she did not run. She could not run. The Vrikan stopped just inches away, so close that Emily could feel the heat radiating from her massive body. Up close she was even more intimidating. Her claws were as long as Emily's fingers. Her teeth, visible when she breathed, could easily crush bones. But then, slowly and carefully, Kethra lowered herself down to one knee. The movement was gentle, almost cautious. She extended one large clawed hand toward Emily, palm up, like she was offering something. Emily stared at that hand for several heartbeats, trying to understand. Then it clicked. The beast was offering to help her reach the panel. She wanted Emily to climb on. With trembling legs, Emily stepped forward. She put one small foot on Kethra's palm, then another. The fur was surprisingly soft, warm against her skin. She held onto the Vrikan's thumb for balance as Kethra slowly stood up, lifting Emily high into the air. The child gasped, clutching tighter, but Kethra's grip was steady. Impossibly steady and gentle for something with such dangerous claws. "Thank you," Emily whispered, and she meant it with her whole heart. For the next 3 hours, they worked together in the flickering darkness. Emily opened the damaged panel and looked inside at the mess of burned wires and melted circuits. She called down instructions describing what she needed. Kethra would carefully lower her, retrieve tools from the repair kit with surprising delicacy, then lift Emily back up. The child's small hands worked on rewiring circuits and replacing damaged components, her fingers moving carefully around hot metal and exposed energy conduits. Kethra held her steady the entire time, never wavering, never complaining. When sparks flew from a damaged connection, the Vrikan shifted her body to shield Emily from them. When a piece of loose paneling fell, Kethra caught it with her free hand before it could hit the child. She was protecting Emily, keeping her safe while she worked. Emily talked to fill the silence, the way children do when they are nervous. She told Kethra about Earth, about blue oceans that stretched to the horizon and mountains that touched the clouds. She talked about her golden retriever named Max, who loved to chase sticks and bark at squirrels. She described her house with the big backyard where she used to play. Then, more quietly, she talked about her mother. How she had gotten sick 2 years ago. How the doctors tried everything but could not save her. How her father cried when he thought Emily was not looking. How he tried so hard every day to make Emily smile again, even though she knew he was hurting too. Kethra listened to every word. She did not interrupt. She did not make a sound except for her breathing. But Emily could tell she was listening. Really listening. For the first time in years of isolation and silence, someone was treating Kethra like a person. Not a beast. Not a monster. Not a threat to be feared. Just someone worth talking to. Someone worth trusting. Emily's young voice echoed through the empty corridors as she worked, and Kethra held her safe. When Emily connected the final wire and sealed the last panel, the lights suddenly blazed to life throughout the entire sector. The darkness was driven back as overhead lights hummed and flickered on. Emily's datapad beeped with a success message. Power restored. The station was safe. But Emily was exhausted. The fear, the work, the stress of it all crashed down on her at once. Her small body trembled with fatigue. Her hands could barely hold the tools anymore. She had done it, but she had nothing left. Kethra felt the child sag against her and immediately understood. She carefully lowered Emily from the high panel and cradled her against her chest. The Vrikan carried the tired girl to a corner of the sector where she had created something like a living space over the years. There was salvaged bedding, old maintenance uniforms that made a soft pile. Kethra settled Emily gently onto this makeshift bed. The child was already half asleep, too exhausted to be afraid anymore. Kethra curled her massive body around the small human, creating a protective barrier. She covered Emily with her tail like a warm blanket. Her body heat drove away the cold of the lower decks. Emily's last conscious thought was that she felt safe. Safer than she had any right to feel in this terrible place. For Kethra, something shifted inside her chest. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt something other than rage or despair or the endless empty loneliness. She looked down at the sleeping child tucked against her fur, and she felt hope. Maybe she was not just a beast after all. When station security arrived 6 hours later, they expected to find remains. Maybe some blood. Maybe torn clothing. Maybe nothing at all if the beast had been thorough. They came prepared with heavy weapons and reinforced shields, ready for a cleanup operation. What they found instead froze them in their tracks and made several of them question everything they thought they knew. The beast, the supposedly mindless killer that everyone feared, was lying curled protectively around the human child. Emily slept peacefully, her small chest rising and falling with deep, calm breaths. One of her tiny hands rested on Kethra's massive paw, like a child sleeping next to a beloved pet. Her blonde hair was messy, and there was grease on her face from the repair work, but she was completely unharmed. Not a scratch. Not a bruise. The Vrikan's amber eyes tracked the security team with sharp, focused intelligence as they entered the sector. Her gaze moved from one guard to another, assessing, calculating. A low warning growl rumbled deep in her chest, vibrating through the floor. The message was clear even without words. Touch the child, those eyes said, and you will discover just how dangerous I can really be. Come one step closer and I will show you what these claws can do. The security team leader raised his weapon, but his hands were shaking. He had never seen the beast like this before. She looked protective. Almost gentle. It did not make sense. One of the guards had forgotten to turn off his helmet camera. The live feed was still broadcasting to the station's security network, which meant it was accessible to anyone with basic clearance. The image spread across Kronos Station like wildfire before anyone realized what was happening. Vel'Vush tried to shut down the feed, but it was too late. Hundreds of species watching their screens saw something impossible. Something that challenged everything they believed. A beast protecting a child. Gentleness where there should have been violence. Compassion where there should have been killing. The crowd started gathering outside the lower deck access points. People wanted to see for themselves. They whispered to each other, shared the footage on their personal devices, argued about what it meant. The story spread from level to level, shop to shop, bar to bar. Robert Parker had been watching the security feeds from an unauthorized access point that another human had hacked for him. The moment he saw his daughter alive, he ran. He did not care about protocols or permissions or consequences. He sprinted through the station corridors, shoving past anyone in his way, his heart pounding with desperate hope. A dozen other humans from the colony ship followed him. They had spent the past 6 hours trying to find another way to reach Emily, arguing with station officials, demanding justice. Now they ran together, a united group, unwilling to let their own be abandoned again. Robert burst through the security cordon at the lower deck entrance, pushing past guards who were too surprised to stop him. "Emily," he shouted, his voice echoing down into the dark corridors. The sound of her father's voice woke Emily from her exhausted sleep. She blinked, confused for a moment about where she was. Then she saw him running toward her, and her face lit up with pure joy. "Dad." She tried to stand up, but she was still tired and wobbly. Kethra steadied her with one gentle paw. Robert skidded to a stop a few feet away, suddenly aware of the massive predator between him and his daughter. The Vrikan watched him carefully, protectively, still not sure if this human was a threat. But Emily was smiling. "Dad, this is Kethra. She helped me fix the power. She held me up so I could reach the panels, and she caught things that fell, and she kept me warm. She's nice." The humans who had followed Robert stared at the massive predator in stunned silence. Kethra stared back, her muscles tense, ready to flee or fight if necessary. She had learned not to trust anyone over the past 3 years. Learned that everyone eventually turned on her. But then Robert Parker did something that shocked everyone present, human and alien alike. He approached slowly, keeping his hands visible where Kethra could see them. He made no sudden movements. He showed no weapons. When he was a few feet away, he lowered himself to one knee, putting himself at a lower level than the Vrikan. It was a gesture of respect. "Thank you," Robert said simply, looking directly into those glowing amber eyes. His voice was thick with emotion. Thank you for protecting my daughter. Thank you for keeping her safe when I could not. Thank you for being kind to her. Kethra's pointed ears flicked forward in surprise. Gratitude. A human was thanking her. For her. Not afraid of her. Not disgusted by her. Just genuinely grateful. When was the last time anyone had thanked her for anything? She could not even remember. The moment was shattered by the arrival of Vel'Thuz. The Seraphian administrator came storming down with a dozen more security drones, his crystalline features twisted with fury. The beast must be contained immediately. The child must be removed. This is against every protocol. This is chaos. A human woman stepped forward from the group. Her name was Captain Linda Torres, commander of the colony ship. She was not tall, but she carried herself with authority. Your protocol, Vel'Thuz, involved throwing a child into what you called a death trap. That is what happened here. You sent an 8-year-old to die. The child sabotaged the station. Vel'Thuz snapped. No, she did not, and we both know it. Linda held up a datapad. We have been doing research, Vel'Thuz. We accessed the galactic records. We know the truth now. Kethra was not exiled for violence or killing. She was exiled by her own people for refusing to participate in their culling rituals. Her planet has a tradition of killing the weak to strengthen the species. Kethra saved younglings who had been marked for death. She showed mercy. Her crime was compassion. A shocked murmur rippled through the growing crowd of station inhabitants who had gathered to watch. People looked at each other, confused, ashamed. Was that true? Had they been lied to? A young clicking engineer pushed through the crowd, his insectoid legs trembling. I must confess something. 2 years ago, I was trapped in a collapsed conduit on level 8. I was injured. I thought I would die there. Kethra found me. She could have left me to die. Nobody would have known. But she pulled me free. She carried me to where others could find me. I was too afraid to speak for her. I was a coward. I am sorry. The crowd went silent. Then another voice spoke up. A Seraphian merchant stepped forward. She returned my lost cargo when thieves dropped it in the lower levels. She could have kept it. Instead, she left it where I would find it. A Kron laborer raised his massive hand. She warned me when a support beam was about to collapse. Saved my life. I never told anyone because I was ashamed. More voices joined in, one after another. Each with a story. Each with a memory of Kethra's secret kindness. Hidden acts of protection. Moments of gentleness that contradicted everything they had been told about the beast. The station's inhabitants began to realize the ugly truth. They had been complicit in torment. They had accepted the narrative without question. They had locked away someone who had done nothing wrong. And it had taken a human child's innocence to reveal their shame. Vel'Thuz realized he was losing control. The crowd was turning against him. His lies were being exposed one by one. People were questioning his authority. He could not allow this to continue. If he lost power here, if the truth came out about all his other corruptions, he would be finished. Cornered and desperate, he made a choice that would seal his fate. This discussion is over. Vel'Thuz shouted, his voice cracking with panic and rage. By my authority as station administrator, I am initiating Emergency Protocol 7. The beast will be terminated immediately. The humans will be removed from the station for violating containment procedures and inciting civil disorder. He pressed commands into his wrist device. Throughout the lower deck sector, security drones powered up with mechanical whirs and clicks. Weapons charged with high-pitched whines. Red targeting lasers appeared, dozens of them painting dots across the humans and across Kethra. The crowd gasped in horror and scattered, people running for cover, afraid of being caught in whatever violence was about to happen. But the humans did not move. Not one of them. Captain Linda Torres stood her ground, her jaw set with determination. Robert Parker stepped forward and put himself directly between the armed drones and his daughter. Behind him, Emily pressed against Kethra's side. 24 human colonists moved together, forming a protective line. They linked arms, creating a barrier of flesh and blood between the weapons and those they meant to protect. We're not leaving, Robert said quietly, but his voice carried through the corridor. Not without both of them. Not without my daughter and not without Kethra. Vel'Thuz's crystalline face twisted into something ugly. Then you will all die with the beast. Your choice, humans. He turned and started moving toward a wall panel, reaching for the manual override controls. The controls that would vent the entire lower deck sector into space. Everything and everyone down here would be sucked out into the void in seconds. What happened next would be talked about in the Galactic Council chambers for years to come, becoming the stuff of legend. A human engineer named Kyle Morrison pulled out his standard data pad, the kind that every colonist carried for basic tasks. His fingers flew across the screen, typing commands faster than most species could even read. He had been working on station security systems for the past 6 hours, ever since Emily had been taken. He had mapped their networks, found their weaknesses, identified their backdoors. And now he used everything he had learned. "Sorry, not sorry," Kyle muttered as he executed the final command. The security drones suddenly stopped responding to Veldaz's commands. Their targeting lasers switched off. They spun around in midair, their weapons now pointing at the Seraphian administrator instead of the humans. Veldaz stared at them in disbelief, pressing commands into his wrist device frantically. Nothing happened. He had been locked out of his own security system. "Stubbornness and spite," Kyle said with a grim smile. "That's all it took." Well, that and 6 hours of really motivated hacking. Captain Torres did not waste the opportunity. She pulled out her own communicator and began transmitting everything. She sent all the records they had gathered about Veldaz's corruption, evidence of bribes and blackmail and abuse of power that went back years. She sent the evidence of Kethra's true exile, the real reasons why she had been condemned. She sent the footage of Emily and the Vriken working together, the image of the child sleeping peacefully against the supposed monster. All of it went directly to Galactic Council headquarters through encrypted human channels that Veldaz could not block. Seeing his plans falling apart, Veldaz made one final desperate move. He abandoned his wrist device and lunged physically for the manual override panel on the wall. If he could just reach it, just pull that lever, he could still vent the sector and destroy all the evidence along with everyone who opposed him. But Kethra moved. She was faster than anything that size should be, faster than anyone expected. One moment she was standing protectively over Emily. The next moment she was between Veldaz and the control panel, her massive form blocking his path completely. She did not attack him. She did not raise her claws or bare her fangs. She simply stood there, immovable and 7-foot wall of protective fury. "You will not harm the child," Kethra spoke for the first time since the humans had arrived, her voice deep and resonant, carrying the weight of absolute conviction. "Never again. I will not allow it." The crowd that remained gasped. The beast could speak. She could think. She was not mindless at all. Everything they had been told was a lie. Veldaz stumbled backward, his confidence finally breaking. You're just an animal?" "No," Kethra said, her amber eyes burning. "I'm someone who protects the innocent." "What are you?" The Galactic Council's response arrived within minutes. A priority communication override, broadcast to every screen on Kronos Station. An official representative appeared, flanked by council guards. The message was clear and direct. Veldaz was immediately stripped of all authority and taken into custody. His crimes would be investigated fully. Kethra's exile was officially reviewed and overturned on the spot. The council offered her a formal apology for the injustice she had suffered. They offered her a position as a cultural liaison between Vriken Space and the council, a role of honor and respect. But before the council representative could finish reading the official offer, Emily tugged on Kethra's fur with her small hand. "You could come with us instead," the child said, looking up at the Vriken with hopeful green eyes. "To our colony. Dad says we're going to build a new home on a planet with big forests and mountains. There's rivers and lakes too. You'd like it there. And I'd really like you to be there. With us." Kethra looked down at the small human who had shown her more kindness in a few hours than her own species had shown in a lifetime. She looked at Robert Parker, who nodded his approval, his eyes warm. She looked at Captain Torres, who was already smiling like the decision was obvious. She looked at the other humans, at Kyle with his data pad, at the colonists who had risked their lives to protect her. They saw her not as a beast but as someone worth saving. Someone worth dying for. "I accept," Kethra said, her voice gentle now. "But not as a liaison. As Emily's guardian. As part of your family. If you will have me." Robert Parker extended his hand in the traditional human greeting. Kethra carefully, gently shook it with one massive clawed hand. The gesture was symbolic. A bond formed. A promise made. 3 weeks later, the human colony ship departed Kronos Station. In the observation deck, Kethra sat with her back against the large viewing window, watching the stars slide past in streams of light as the ship jumped to faster-than-light speeds. Emily was curled against her side, already asleep, wrapped in a soft blanket. The child's small hand rested on Kethra's paw, exactly the way it had been that first night in the lower decks. The other humans had accepted Kethra without question or hesitation. They saw what others had missed. The most dangerous thing about her was not her claws or fangs or strength. It was the size of her heart, and how fiercely she would protect those she loved. As news of the incident spread across the galaxy through official channels and unofficial gossip, something shifted in the collective consciousness of 1,000 worlds. Other species labeled dangerous began to notice. Outcasts in forgotten corners looked up with new hope. The forgotten dared to dream. Because humanity had shown the galaxy something it had lost somewhere along the way. Compassion was not weakness. Sometimes the bravest thing you could do was see the person behind the monster. And sometimes all it took was a little girl who was not afraid to say thank you. Kethra looked down at Emily sleeping peacefully, and gently adjusted the blanket around the child with her claw tips. In the reflection on the dark window, Kethra saw herself. She barely recognized what she saw. The rage that had burned in her chest for years was gone. The despair that had weighted her down had faded away. For the first time in her entire life, Kethra felt something truly alien to her experience. She felt like she belonged. She felt like she had a home. And it was all because one small human had dared to be kind when no one else would.